everyone, my name is Allie and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up, which means it's the first wrap-up of 2024. I'm so excited. I have 10 whole books to talk about this month. We're gonna have to get through this pretty quickly because I don't want to ramble too much. I don't want this to be like an hour-long video. I will say that I feel like the books that I didn't absolutely love probably outweighed the books that I did end up loving. I believe I only have one 5-star read, which I think tells you a bit, especially if you've been watching my channel for a while. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily generous with my 5 stars, but I'm also not really stingy with them either. The fact that I only gave like one book 5 out of 5 stars is a little interesting. I did give a few of them 4 out of 5 stars, but the majority of them I felt like I left unrated, and that's not a very good sign. Let's just get right on into it. Also, if the lighting changes pretty drastically throughout this video, I will say it's been raining all day and the clouds have been moving constantly, so the lighting might shift a little bit as we go through this video. Hopefully it's not too distracting. Okay, so the first book I want to talk about is a romance book, and that is I Think He Knows by Katie Bailey. And I ended up not rating this one. This one is basically like a friends to lovers romance, and the male main character is a very successful and popular actor. I believe that when they first met, he wasn't an actor quite yet. They were both still in school, so they've been friends for quite a while, and they've always kind of had feelings for each other, but neither of them has said anything about it. That is until the media kind of gets a little bit confused and puts out a false story about the male main character and the female main character, and they kind of get thrust together into this sort of like fake dating relationship. I thought that this book was really entertaining and really cute, but it definitely wasn't like the type of adult romance book that just lingers in my brain. Honestly, I feel like I read it and I sat with it for a second and I just kind of moved on. It didn't really leave any lasting impression on me. Honestly, I had to reread the synopsis for this book to even remember what happened, and still I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details, honestly. Like, it just was not super unique or different. It just was very much like a stereotypical adult romance, one that you just kind of consume and then move on with. Definitely not one of my favorite books this year, and kind of like a weird way to start off the reading year, honestly. But I will say that it's a book that I believe I started on like December 30th or 31st or something like that, and so I think that's why I don't really like have any sort of connection to it. It was just sort of like a filler book just to pass the time. The second book that I ended up reading in January was Beyond the Filigree Wall by Melissa Wright, and I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy this. It was a really cute, sweet, fast fantasy romance book. I don't know if I'd necessarily call this romantasy. Like, I have a very fuzzy understanding of what romantasy is. I feel like you guys in the comments will let me know if this book is considered romantasy. I really don't care all that much about like the categorization of, or like even like the distinction between fantasy romance, romance fantasy, romantasy. I don't know. It's all just very blurry to me and isn't necessarily like super important, but I know that's important to some people, so I figure I should at least mention that distinction. I don't know. It was a really short book, I will say, and in my review I was like, I could have read another like 5 hours of this book and I still would have had a great time and I would not have been bored. Like, I really enjoyed these characters. I really enjoyed the whimsical vibe that it had. So this book was like totally right up my alley. And it was kind of cute. Like, it had this sort of like head buddy thing between these two characters. It follows this girl named Etta, and she has always wanted this very coveted post within the government of this world, but the only thing that is standing in her way is a man named Gideon Alexander, and he is really against her getting this post. He doesn't really like her, he doesn't really trust her, and in return she also does not like him, despite there definitely being some like chemistry and attraction between them. It's a really cute little enemies to lovers sort of romance. In the synopsis, it's described as a clean, slow burn romance with a properly stabby heroine and the low commitment of a standalone series in this light Regency fantasy romp for fans of Enchantment of Ravens and Little Thieves. I can definitely see some Margaret Rogerson inspiration in there, so I definitely see where they're coming from. But yeah, I thought it was really, really sweet, and I definitely enjoyed my time reading it. I do wish it was a little bit longer, just so I could like live in that world for a little bit more and understand the characters a little bit deeper and really be fully committed to their romance. But overall, I thought it was a lot of fun, and I definitely enjoyed my time reading it, and I think I would love to read other books from this author. The third book that I read in the month of January was Sippin Dom Through a Straw, Reimagining Success as a Disabled Achiever by Eddie Ndopu, and I really, really enjoyed this book. Did I give this? Oh, I also gave this one 5 stars, which I totally forgot that I did. I really, really enjoyed this memoir. I thought it was so interesting, and Eddie has such a fun and engaging voice. He's definitely the type of person that I could read multiple books from through his perspective, because he just has that sort of voice that makes you feel like you're talking to a friend. And this specific memoir really focuses a lot on his experience with higher education. He received a scholarship and admission to Oxford University in England, and he kind of quickly realizes how many ableist hoops he's going to have to jump through. Not even just like being at Oxford, but just like getting to Oxford. He was born with spinal muscular atrophy, a rare degenerative motor neuron disease affecting his mobility. And throughout his experience with Oxford, he runs into so much structural and even just like social ableism. And it was just really eye-opening to see how these institutions make it so difficult for their disabled students to thrive and be successful, and just how easy it could be for them to actually like accommodate these students and make their experiences so much better than they are currently. I think that this is a really great book, and I highly, highly recommend it to everybody. Like I said, it was so engaging and so interesting, and I just really liked getting to see through his perspective. The next book that I read is actually the first book that I owned physically that I read this year, and that is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I loved this book. This was my other 5-star read. I had a really great run there with these 2 books. I loved it so, so much. And it's really cemented Ali Hazelwood as one of like my favorite romance authors. I not only love the way that she writes romance, but I also love the way that she incorporates science and like different STEM fields into her romance books. I think that that is so cool, especially as somebody who is not super into science. She really makes it very accessible and puts it within my realm of understanding of these things, because honestly science is just like something that goes in one ear and out the other for me, but she really makes it feel a lot more tangible. But yeah, this book is about Elsie, and she is currently an adjunct professor, but she really wants to further her career, but she really wants to do some more legitimate like theoretical physics research, I guess. And because she's just an adjunct professor, she doesn't really make a lot of money, so in order to support herself, she uses this website that kind of provides fake girlfriends and provides her services to that website and works as a fake girlfriend. I know, that's kind of a roundabout way of saying it, but one day she's helping her favorite client, and she is at a family dinner for him, and she's kind of always butting heads with his very annoying but also gorgeous older brother, and they kind of end up realizing that they are running in the same sort of like scientific circles as each other. And while she is trying to be in the running for a job at the physics department at MIT, she realizes that Jack, the older brother, is part of the decision-making process for who gets that job. I ended up really loving this book. I thought it was so much fun. I don't know if I love it more than Love on the Brain. I know Love on the Brain is not everybody's favorite book, but for some reason it's my favorite. I absolutely love that book for some reason. I don't know why. It was just so much fun. And that's not to say that this one wasn't fun as well. Like, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, but I don't know if I love it quite as much. I'm not sure. I really loved Elsie and Jack's relationship. It kind of gave me the same vibes as like While You Were Sleeping without the coma element. But yeah, it's really cute because like he knows something's fishy with her. She doesn't really like him. She's kind of annoyed that he's trying to like pry around into her life. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I think it's totally worth the hype. I also did a reading vlog where I read this book and talked more about it, so I will leave the link down below for that reading vlog. The next book that I read was Hey Hun, Sales, Sisterhood, Supremacy, and Other Lies Behind Multi-Level Marketing by Emily Lynn Poulsen. This is one that I was a little bit disappointed by, but I also kind of went into it knowing that it probably wasn't going to be like a super in-depth like analysis of multi-level marketing or even really a critique of it in a way. Like, I kind of was trying to balance my expectations of what this book was going to be, but I felt like ultimately it felt very juvenile and unserious. And I also talked to somebody on Instagram about this book, and I kind of described it as it felt a lot like Real Housewives of multi-level marketing. It kind of just felt like it was this author's way of venting about the other women that were in this multi-level marketing scheme and gossiping, just kind of not really sticking to the topic of everything that's wrong with multi-level marketing, and it was definitely more like interpersonal drama. I thought it was fine. I thought it was entertaining, but it just wasn't really anything substantial. And I'm sure that there are other books out there that are much better on this topic, and there are definitely podcasts and YouTube videos and other things like that that are also very good about talking about this topic in a much more like serious and more critical way than this author was able to do. So I wasn't super impressed by it, but I also kind of knew that I shouldn't have like super high expectations going into this book. The next book that I ended up reading was What Kind of Creatures Are We by Noam Chomsky, and I don't believe that I ended up reading this book mainly because this one is a very like academic based nonfiction book and focuses a lot on linguistics and sort of like a philosophical exploration of what makes humans human, especially in comparison to other animals, and how our ways of communicating are both different and also similar to other animals. I felt like at moments it wasn't fully centralized on the specific topic that it was engaging with. However, I did really enjoy my time getting to read this book. I mostly listened to it as an audiobook while I was doing my nails. I just kind of like started it on a whim. I was going through my Hoopla and I was like, oh, this looks interesting, let's read this. And I'm like, I have a little bit of an interest in linguistics. I've never studied it before, honestly, but I'm always very intrigued whenever I come across like an article or a video on linguistics, so I figured I might as well read this book. And I've never read anything from Noam Chomsky and I felt like totally left behind. I figured why not, and I did really enjoy it. I thought it was super interesting, and I don't know if I think I said this in a vlog that I haven't uploaded yet, but it definitely reminded me of being in an academic setting, which I really miss and I absolutely love. So I think that's mostly why I found this one so intriguing. So highly recommend it if you want to check it out. It's a super fast audiobook and I think it's like 5 hours long. It's really not gonna take you a long time to get through it, so definitely recommend it. The next book that I read is another one that I own, and that is Just My Type by Fallon Ballard. And I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. This is like really perfect for the type of reader who is like super nerdy, a little bit millennial-esque, but it's still really cute despite some of the like pop culture references that happen in this book. And they are kind of for a reason. They're not just like randomly thrown out there. This book is about these two main characters, and they knew each other in high school and they were in this very committed relationship up until they both went to college. and she ended up going to USC, I believe. And they were supposed to go together, but they ended up not going together. Their relationship kind of ended up fizzling out and ending. But she has always been in love with him. She has always wanted to kind of like rekindle that romance. End up having this very awkward encounter at a high school reunion, and things don't go well, and she ends up kind of harboring these like really negative feelings towards him. So when she ends up seeing him again, and they're kind of both up for this sort of promotion at their work, so it kind of turns into this competition to see who can write the best articles and bring in the most viewers. She has to write about being single for the first time in her life, and he has to write about being in a committed relationship. So it kind of gave me very similar vibes to How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. And I love that rom-com so much. It's one of my favorites. And I ended up really enjoying this book. I don't think that it's like one of my new favorites necessarily, but it's definitely one of those romance books that I can kind of have in my repertoire and recommend to people if they're ever looking for a romance book. This one was just really fun. It had a lot of great banter. I really enjoyed the main character. She is very interesting, and basically she's like this journalist and she's doing a lot of listicles and stuff like that, but she really wants to be doing something a little bit more attuned to like her interests, not necessarily something more serious. She's really into pop culture and fandom related things, and she runs this blog that nobody really knows about. She doesn't really promote it or anything. It's really just for herself, but she does want to make her career kind of go into that direction. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. I thought it was a lot of fun. Definitely a cute little read for the beginning of the year. The next book that I read is a collection of essays that's called Quietly Hostile by Samantha Irby. And I ended up really enjoying this book. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was really truly so humorous and so funny, and Samantha Irby has such an incredible voice. So many of her stories and so many of her essays and her takes on things just made me laugh out loud. She's just very quippy and very quick on her feet and makes these sort of comments where you're left feeling like, I've definitely felt that way, but I've never put it into those words, and it's absolutely hilarious. I will say that this essay collection definitely focuses a lot on the sort of beginning months and year of COVID. It can feel a little bit dated and a little bit of its time, but I also found that it was just like very entertaining and engaging and just so much fun. And it didn't really matter that it was focused a lot on the COVID era. It just ended up being a really fun essay collection. I wanted something that was going to be lighthearted but also nonfiction, and I've just been in like such a huge nonfiction mood this entire month. I know that usually it's nonfiction November, but for some reason in November I was just not feeling it. It wasn't until January, and I feel like this happens every year, where I start off the year feeling really into nonfiction books, and then towards the end of the year not so much. I think it's just because I'm in that mode of like, it's the beginning of the year, it's a fresh start, it's like, get your life together, you know, better yourself. And so I always just gravitate more towards nonfiction books. Not necessarily that a collection of comical essays is going to do that for me, but I think you know what I mean. The second to last book that I read was That Kind of Guy by Stephanie Archer, and actually technically this is a DNF, but I did get like 70% of the way through this book, so I'm gonna count it because it has been wasting weeks of my life and weeks that I can never get back. I really tried to read this book, genuinely. Like, I spent so much time trying to get through this book and trying to get myself interested in it, and it just never really quite hit the right note for me. Like, in theory, this book should have worked perfectly. I should have loved it. It should have gotten 4 out of 5 stars. I could have, you know, enjoyed it and moved on. However, this book dragged so much, and it felt so repetitive at times. Like, so much of what the two main characters were thinking about and doing and saying and whatever just felt like, okay, we've heard that already. Like, can we move on? Can we think about something else, do something else? But I also just felt like these two main characters were so boring. Just like, no personality, no ambitions. I mean, they had ambitions, but they also like never really, I don't know, like, maybe it's because it felt like everything was just kind of like handed to them, like everything just kind of worked out, and I'm like, where is the conflict? I need a little bit of conflict. I need a little bit of something to happen, and it just wasn't happening. I'm 70% of the way through and barely any conflict was happening. It was just too easy. So I ended up DNFing it. I was like, this cannot waste any more of my time. I have to move on, and I'm giving myself the credit for it. And I highly, highly suggest that you do the same. Don't feel bad about claiming your DNFs as read. There's no Goodreads police, I promise. They're not out for you. And the very last book that I read was actually one that I did not plan on finishing in January, but I ended up really, really loving and having a lot of fun with, so I ended up finishing it basically like in one day. And that is Black Girls Must Die Exhausted by Jane Allen. I have been meaning to read this book for the longest time, and I've just never gotten around to it. So I decided just on a whim, like I'm on Hoopla, just looking through all the books that I want to read, and I remember that I've been wanting to read this one, so I just kind of decided, let's get into it. And I'm really glad that I did, because I did find it really enjoyable. I'm not sure if this is categorized as like literary fiction or romance or just general fiction. It kind of gave me a lot of like the literary fiction vibes, so I'm just gonna call it that. But basically this is about the main character, and she is a reporter. She is like a news reporter, a newscaster in Los Angeles. She is really wanting this promotion at her work, and she's also going through it with a diagnosis from her doctor, where he basically says that she has considerably less eggs at her age than she's supposed to have, and so she kind of feels like it's a dire situation and that she either really needs to get pregnant or needs to freeze her eggs or whatever. So she's dealing with that. She's also dealing with a sort of on the rocks relationship that she's going through, and she has friend drama and family drama and a lot of things going on. And this also deals a lot with how she moves through her life and through society as a Black woman. And I just found it really, really intriguing and so beautifully written. This is part of a series, which I don't really know if I'm going to continue with the series. I'm going to think about it. I felt like this book was such a great and strong book. It didn't really need to be a series. I'm not really sure why it's a series. I feel like it could definitely just stand on its own and be a very full-rounded story. It's so funny because I knew that it was a series, but for some reason I thought that it was sort of like it follows like different characters, but it follows the same character throughout this trilogy. So not my favorite thing in the whole wide world. I'm not like super into series anymore unless they follow separate characters. I'm a little bit hesitant to go on and read the second book, but we'll see. I mean, like anything can happen. I might change my mind. I think I might read some reviews and see if it's really worth it to continue on with the series. But I do really enjoy this book. I really liked the main character. I loved the family dynamics and the friendship dynamics. Those are two things that I really love exploring in these kind of books. And I also loved how close she was with her grandmother. And I was also really interested in the talks about her fertility issues. The one thing that I will say that I didn't absolutely love was the like casual fat phobia within this book. It's not like super prevalent throughout the book, but it's not like a big plot point or anything. It's just like a couple of offhand comments in this one section of the book. So just beware of that if you're gonna go into it. I had no idea that it was gonna happen, so I was a little bit surprised because like this book didn't really give me the vibe of being fat phobic, so I was like, oh, that's really weird that that just happened. But it wasn't really enough for me to DNF the book and like write it off or whatever. I just figured that I would let you guys know that that happened so you could be aware of it if you're gonna pick it up. But yeah, I do highly recommend it regardless, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, let me know if you've also read this book and what you thought about it in the comments. So yeah, that was my entire January wrap up. I definitely had some ups and some downs throughout this month, but I'm really glad that I read all of the books that I did. It was a little bit overwhelming, I will say. I might not read quite as many books in February, but you know, never say never. We'll see what happens. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them. I want to know if you liked them or if you disliked them. And also let me know if there were any books that you read in January that you absolutely loved and you think that I would also love. I'm always looking for recommendations, especially if they're like fantasy. I feel like I'm really not doing a good job at finding fantasy books that I'm loving. So definitely let me know. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this wrap up. And if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. All the links are down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!